Whole Man Academy. Because the world needs strong men. Whole Man Academy is changing the game for men around the world. It's for guys who want to live an epic life of fun and adventure, no matter what. We believe, deep down, all men want to go on their own hero's journey to becoming resilient, confident, fearless, and fulfilled. Listen to be inspired by guys who don't settle for living a life of mediocrity. This is your call to action and call to adventure. Are you ready?
Okay, so this is the Whole Man Academy podcast, episode 112. My guest today is Ken Rusk, an author, entrepreneur, thought leader, plenty more. Also a blue-collar advocate, which we're going to talk about. It's a term I'd not heard before, and I like it. So we're going to jump into all different things to do with the landscape of men. But Ken, first of all, how are you and where are you?
I'm great. I'm talking to you today from Toledo, Ohio, in the United States, and it's a beautiful day. And again, happy to spend some time with you here.
It's great, and I think this. When I spoke to a guy called Brad Hart, who is from the States last week, and the podcast now being up to 112 episodes, we've talked to guys from all around the world, and that's what's great is getting different get different ideas from guys of different ages, different experiences, but also that live in different parts of the world, because what's going on in certain parts of the country, people maybe in the UK don't even know because they just watch the news, which generally is a load of rubbish anyway, or agenda driven. So I just wanted for you, firstly, you're obviously in Ohio, but have you always lived in Ohio?
Yeah, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I lived all along Lake Erie, so probably 20 to 30 minutes along the south side of Lake Erie. And we were in Cleveland for a while, then we moved to Toledo when we started our business, and we've been here ever since. So.
Well, just before we pressed record, I said I would shock you by saying that I've actually been to Ohio, and that was about 2015 when they had the obstacle course racing world championships out there. And so I raced, against me against the world elite, as it were. And it was, we started early in the morning, so it was really pretty cold, but it was, an amazing kind of 12 miles of rough terrain and hills and everything. So that was my brief experience of going to Ohio. So at least I've ticked it off the list. But have you traveled to Europe at all and been to the UK or anything like that?
I have, yeah. I've been to London. I've been to Scotland a bunch of times because I'm a golfer. Okay, I've been to Ireland, and I've been to Germany. I've been to Switzerland. Been to Italy. I mean, it's been really cool. You said something earlier that is so right. I think if you get busy kind of living in your own little world, you don't realize the unbelievably cool stuff that exists all around this planet of ours. And it's just not that difficult to make those things happen and to go see those things. And, playing golf at the old course, in Scotland, in St. Andrews, it's kind of breathtaking because you grow up watching all the greats playing on this golf course, and the walk down 18. I was very fortunate because I was able to birdie 16 and 18 that day. And it was just like, the stars were shining down on me. So, yeah, there's a lot of cool things in this world if you just find the time to go see them.
Yeah, no, and I'll tell you why I laugh when you said you've been to Ireland, because I've never been to Ireland, which is ridiculous. It's like about a 40-minute flight away, and I still haven't made it. But I've managed to get out to Miami and, been to San Francisco, San Diego, and what I love most about traveling there, not just seeing the new experiences, but experiencing different people and different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, the last 2 years where, people have had their freedoms taken away, rightly or wrongly, depending on your thoughts on it. But what that always saddens me is that, for me, as well as a lot of people, it kind of impacted on their opportunities to experience things further afield. So are you able to travel freely? And what was that like for the kind of, year or 2 years where basically people were told they weren't supposed to be kind of living their life?
Well, it's always scary when, your government says, hey, there's these germs floating around and it's going to be devastating. And and then you're hearing different things coming out, and then you're finding out that the risk was extremely low. And if you had a bunch of other pre-existing conditions, then that might have actually caused your demise and not this particular illness. So it was very confusing for us, because when you have anything that's brand new like that, and the origins aren't clear, you've got a bunch of people that they tend to guess about what the next step is supposed to be based on what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
And so the ever evolving, ever changing scenario was pretty challenging. Now, our business was, we clean up, unhealthy basements. So we were allowed to keep operating, but I had a friend who had 400 employees in the restaurant industry who he just he had 4 hours just to let them all go. And so it was a very confusing time. I will say this, if there is a silver lining, I've never seen more people getting back to, barbecuing in their backyard versus driving to restaurants, or taking dogs for a walk, or, throwing a football, or riding bikes around the neighborhood, getting close with their families again. So I guess with every issue, there's an opportunity. And that silver lining was certainly prevalent during that period of time.
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, there's always a kind of, I say, a positive spin on everything. And I think that's important, to try and take something good out of what was, a painful time. And do you know what? I mean, with the Whole Man Academy, we started back in 2018, and it was encouraging guys of all different ages, backgrounds, experiences to get together to talk, just because you know what guys are like. And, I'm not in my 20s or 30s anymore. I'm in my mid 40s. And therefore, I've grown up around that, where men just kept everything locked away. But what I saw in the last 2 years, of course, was, that was, my example would be, you could have a guy, a bit like you said with your friend, you and I could have been in a consortium that owned 3 nightclubs, 3 restaurants, 3 hotels that are all thriving, and business was great. And then through no fault of your own, your business is basically destroyed overnight. And, we heard of examples over here. I listened to a really sad story of a guy whose father had a couple of restaurants, and same thing. And he ended up taking his own life because, he felt like he'd let his staff who had been there for their entire career down. Wow. And I think that's where the last 2 years, and that's why we move on to that, I think have been a totally different test for, let's say, if we're talking about men, than any other years, because no one's ever had to face that. But what's the landscape like for men in the US at the moment, and more so the guys in their, say 20s and 30s?
I think there's been this whole new world of, social media and social influencing and social marketing, digital marketing, internet marketing. And it's opened up a whole lot of options for people. I can tell you one thing for sure. It's never been easier to start your own business in my entire career than it has been recently, because, if you're, let's say you're a contractor, if you have a pickup truck and a cell phone, you've got a company. Yeah. Where before you needed an office, and you needed, staff, and you needed accountants, and you needed, we used to keep our numbers with pencil and rulers on pieces of paper. So yeah, that's been kind of cool to see what the possibilities are. At the same time, I also think there's a lot of guys that are tiptoeing around a little bit, because, they're just trying to be the same old guys that they were. And yet they're getting kind of chapped here and there for the different things that they may say, think, or do. And that used to be kind of normal, and it would roll off your shoulders and everyone would have fun. And now, you're in this weird kind of, check everything that you say, watch everything that you do. And so it's kind of a mixed bag of opportunity and being cautious at the same time. So I think it'll come out great. But there's some guys trying to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah, it's certainly an ever-changing landscape because again, for you and I, we didn't grow up with social media, and right. I will happily admit I've done some stupid stuff on nights out, that usually involve beers and your mates and maybe girls and God knows what else. But thankfully back then, people can whip out a phone and video it and then tweet it to the world in 3 seconds. So there's small mercies for that. But yeah, definitely it's I was thinking for guys in their teens, but the 20s as well. It is a minefield, because everything you do is everything you write online can be screenshot and held against you. And we've seen people go back years and accuse people of stuff from when they were in their teens. And you're like, it's a good question of where does it stop? But take me back to yourself, because you started young in construction. And for you, kind of what led you into that path to start with?
Well, just to comment on what you just said. Yeah. I would say this: if you're willing to go back 15 or 18 years into someone's past to see what they might have said or done, then we all get to see your 15 or 18 years of your past.
Yeah.
Okay. Because judgment is a two-way street. Okay. If you're going to judge somebody, so here we go. You know, if you're going to expose that, then it's your turn next. Right. But yeah, my upbringing was kind of cool. It was kind of rural America, and in Ohio, a small town called Amherst, and grew up there, loved it. Wide open spaces, as you would say. But then when I went to the east side of Cleveland, when I was 15, I was in high school, and my high school shared a fence with an industrial park. And after school, we'd cut through that fence and we'd go down to the carryout, the little store there, and we would just kind of hang out after school. So walking through this hole in the fence, you had to go through this industrial park. And I kind of liked it because there was lots of energy. There's lots of guys milling around and, things that like dump trucks and backhoes and all that kind of stuff that that young kids like. And so one day I just said, hey, what do you guys do here? And they said, well, we basically dig ditches. And I said, okay, well, I can do that. I need money to take out my girlfriend for pizza or go bowling with my buddies or whatever. So
the important stuff. Yeah.
So I wanted my first used car. So I signed up. I knew someone that had been working there, and I signed up. And in the summer times I would dig ditches, and in the winter times I'd work in the office. And then I did that for a few years. And then our company grew so fast that they wanted to open franchises around the country. And they came to me and said, you know both sides of the business, even though you're only 19, 19. Do you want to help us do this? So I lived out of a suitcase for 3 years and opened up a bunch of branch offices, which was good because I got experience with somebody else's money, which was cool.
Yeah.
But then I settled down in my own office here in Toledo, Ohio. That was in '86, and started with 6 people, and now we have almost 200, and it's been a heck of a ride.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love hearing stories of guys that, especially starting young. And I know, we spoke to different guys who've just grasped those opportunities. One a few months ago who was in Canada, and the similar thing, started off at 18, 19, and just, sometimes it was like saying, Joe, you just got to put your hand up and say, give me a job, or, pick me, or let me have a go at something. And do you feel for that? Because I wondered, when you're that age, I mean, the learning curve must be so steep when you've got nothing else to, you haven't started any other businesses at all.
Well, I think the difference is, back then there was probably 100 guys like me that all wanted the same job. Well, now because of this blue collar crisis that I call it, you've got a much smaller class of people that want that job. So like for me, it used to be, me boss, you employee, why should I hire you? Now I look across the table and the kid looking back at me says, hey, what's in it for me to work here?
Yeah.
So
to me.
And that's kind of cool though, because if I can answer that question, I know I have somebody. And I'm okay if they're a little bit selfish, because my motto is, I can't get what I want, nor can my company get what it wants or needs until you all get what you want first. And so I'm okay with that, because if I have someone who's goal driven, who's working for themselves within my company, I'm all over that. And I think that's the thing, because if you find somebody like that, man, because they're so, the pool has shrunk so much. You coddle that person like a baby dove, and you give them every single thing as fast as you can. So the learning curve is really, really steep now and really quick. Yeah. And I think people can rise up a lot faster than they could back when there was, a lot of competition for the same type of work.
It's really interesting, because the economic landscape, or the employment landscape, like over here, I don't know if it's the same in the States, but like every single like restaurant is looking for staff. And literally, some restaurants, I've been in one local to me, where the guy was like, I can only accept like 50% of our capacity because we just don't have any staff, and therefore I can't deliver a decent service, so I can only let people in. And would you say then that, for want of a better word, that people are desperate for like skilled tradespeople, basically?
Yeah. So just a couple of stats for you real quick.
Yeah.
In the US, 167 million people would be considered full employment. Okay. If you look up what they actually do for a living, 77 million of those people do something with their hands. So 50% almost of our population does something in some, support role. Now, my challenge was, back in our high school, when I was in high school back in the 80s, they had something called shop class. And you could walk down the hallway and watch somebody through these glass windows milling a table for a leg. Leg for a table. Or you could watch someone working on a transmission for a car. Or you could watch someone, cutting someone's hair. Or you could watch someone welding or, making an electrical outlet happen. They kicked all those classes out of most of the high schools and replaced them with computers. Now, computers are fine. We needed to learn them, but why did it have to be one or the other, right? So that was step one, because you eliminated the accidental discovery of how cool the trades are for millions of future kids, future carpenters, plumbers, electricians. So that's gone now. And then, I used to go out in the backyard, get some lumber and some hammer and a hammer and some nails and go make a tree fort or whatever I wanted to do. Now kids are building cities on Minecraft on these things. And that's not the same experience, that. So if you couple those two forces up with the fact that, unfortunately, colleges are really good at shaming parents into saying, if your kid doesn't go to school, he's going to be nothing or she's going to be nothing. Those three forces came together to really put a hurt on the supply of people who would otherwise have naturally gravitated towards those trades. And it's like a perfect storm against the flow of those people. And it's something that I'm trying to talk, loud and clear about to try and change that trend.
Well, there's so much to unpack there, and I think it's really interesting because it's when you look at the trends of men dropping away from those, I guess you could call them masculine trades as well. And you look at the massive declining testosterone rates across the world in men, which is, I think it's going to have a very big impact on fertility in the coming years, and therefore population, which is an interesting rabbit hole to go down. But I do think that, like you said, I mean, our boys don't go to school. We've got one that's 5 and one that's 3, and the 5-year-old just loves building things. And the further we can keep him for a while away from computers, because you feel like that takes away their creativity.
Sure.
It's just, I mean, we all know you sit and look at TV and it's hypnotic. And we know if we put the TV on, he could sit for ages and ages and ages just with his mouth open. And then we try and say, let's get outside, let's build a something, or, he's got his toolkit and everything. And I guess that pushes through to the, I've got friends who've got kids that would rather sit in their room and play on their computer all night than they would do anything active or creative, which is quite worrying, really. But I see with you, I know you've done mentoring as well. Is that one of the things for you that you kind of see has been the trend of, moving into computers and kids doing less of the outdoor stuff because they're too busy pressing little buttons?
Well, I think what happens is, as an employer, you're almost forced to mentor or coach the people that you have within your organization. It's funny because I hear a lot of people saying, man, all of a sudden I got to work on culture in my company. I have to worry about, energy and color and music and sound and celebrations. And, I have to worry about all that stuff now. And I'm like, well, listen, I'm a ditch digger. I've been doing this for 36 years. Okay. I've had to worry about that culture forever because my job is one of the lower ones on the pole, as they say. Right. So to me, it's no big deal. I've been doing it for a long time, which is why it's so easy for me to share this knowledge to other people, because you got to have a cool place to work or you're going to be a lonely guy or a lonely girl. Okay. So yeah. And the other thing is, the thing about the testosterone that this gets a little controversial, but you're 100% right. I think we have some parenting issues out there, because not only are the parents watching their kids stare at these screens, but they're staring at the screens. So as a family, 4 hours a day goes by without any real interaction. Now it's quiet, I get that, but what are you really doing? What's really happening there? So we have to recognize that as parents, we're imprinting or downloading everything that young person or that computer has.
Yeah.
If you consider a young person being a blank computer, we're downloading everything that they're going to have for the future. And it really bothers me how we're all looking down at our screens and not looking at each other and saying, man, what the heck are we creating here? We got to think about what, because at some point in the future, I'm pushing her out of the nest or him out of the nest.
Yeah.
What am I going to get? What am I going to see? So that's a big concern for me.
I think, and also you touched on the education system, and I know for you, I've obviously read your website and had a look at some of your Instagram posts, and I found the education system in across the world fascinating. But I guess for the US, do you feel like that? Because it's funny, and I totally agree. You said that it's like parents could be shamed if their children weren't going to go to college, or maybe over here it's that like people go, oh, if we say we're home educating our kids and not homeschooling, because we're trying to take the school away and it's more about just education. And they say, well, how will they go to university? And you say, who says they need to go to university? And people are like, but university, but
right.
Is that what you see over there? And I know you encourage people to realize that there is another option that doesn't involve getting a massive debt saddled on you after 3 or 4 years.
Well, yeah, we absolutely do see that. And I think parents, somehow all the high schools went from, teaching kids so they could be prepared for the world to, hey, everybody, we're now a college prep school. Okay. And we're getting funded and rewarded and accoladed by all the kids that we push into college. That's a recipe for a disaster right there. Okay. So yeah, I do see that. And the thing is, the same people who think, man, you have to, my kids got to go to college, is really crying about the fact that they just paid an electrician $1,000 to wire an outlet in their house. Okay. And yet they don't connect those dots. And it just makes me crazy because they want to complain about that guy. And yet for every 10 electricians that retire today, only 5 are replacing them. You don't have to be an economics genius to figure out that supply and demand is going to work in the favor of the few. So for me, it's not about being anti-college. I mean, if you're going to operate on my shoulders so I can get back out on the golf course, I want you to know everything there is to know about a knife before you pick it up.
Yeah.
Just the same way as a teacher or an architect or an engineer or a banker. But if you're just going to school because someone told you you had to, you really got to examine the fact that that's never been true in the history of the world. Why is it all of a sudden true now? Because if you get out of bed to go to that college class, you've crossed 300 blue collar jobs just getting to the door.
Yeah.
And those jobs still exist. So yeah, and I say the contrarian view is the way to go, because if everyone's going this way, the guy or girl who goes that way is going to be handsomely rewarded because they're doing something nobody else is doing.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially if the last 2 years have shown me anything. It's that following the herd isn't always the best. The best mentality.
You better believe it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so and I wondered. I mean, we talk a lot about fatherhood here at the Whole Man Academy. Because we say, and you talked about parental imprinting, and I see myself with my boys. My mannerisms, the things I do and say, you see them watching, listening, and copying everything that I do. And I wonder, for you growing up, did you have a father that was there? And if so, what was your relationship like?
My father was, he was a traveling salesman. So he was there, but he was there like, maybe 3-4 days a week, but not every week, until I became like 15 or 16. And then he had his own company. So then he was home a lot more often. But, I had 4 brothers. And so my dad he was a hardcore Marine in his day. So he worked our house kind of like a platoon because he had to. He had to. There was 5 boys under the age of 9. Okay.
Wow.
So he had to line us up and we all had to make our beds, and he could bounce the quarter off the bed. And, he would tell us once and that was it. So for me, I just learned about the efficiencies of that, because he fathered in a very efficient way where there wasn't a lot of drama. There wasn't a lot of baloney, wasn't a lot of crying and whining going on. So it it really helped me with my own daughter to be really efficient and say, look at, we're going to have this relationship where I'm going to teach you everything that I know, and you're going to learn from the world as well. Let's not waste time on things that don't further that. Let's not waste time on things that are, pathetic, like, gossip and drama and rumor. I mean, let's just stick to what's real and what can better you as a person and what can prepare you to play around in this great big world. So
I love it. I think it's because, to state the obvious, none of us, well, I say none of us, some of us might be, but for most guys, when they become a dad, we're not taught what to do or how to be or what to say, and usually we just revert back to what our father was like, and assuming that just because that's the way it's always been done, that's the right way. So I always find it really interesting to talk to people, but I notice, that's why I laugh when you said 5 boys, because even with 2, they have unlimited energy, and until the moment they drop, it is kind of carnage, which I love.
right.
But yeah, I take my hat off to anybody that's got 2 boys, but 5 boys is impressive. But I wanted to ask you, one of the other things I find a lot of guys I talk to, either interviewing on the podcast, a lot of them say, I'd love to write a book. Now, some of them, they don't even know why they want to write a book. Maybe it's because they think it'll just make them lots of money, but they haven't got anything particularly amazing to write about. And I know you wrote Blue Collar Cash. Firstly, what was it like writing the book? And then what would a guy get from reading it?
Well, those are 2 huge questions. Writing the book was, looking back on it, writing a book was kind of the easy part. The stories came to me pretty quickly, and I had a lot of people that were around me, even in my own company, that I could learn from and talk about when it comes to relationships and emotions and future and vision and forecasting and goals and, all the characteristics of entrepreneurship. So I didn't really start out writing a book. I started out writing a letter to my daughter, who was suffering from a pretty serious illness at the time. And that was a pretty scary 5 years. So what I would do is I would write to her about what I thought was important. Like, these are the things I think you should be chasing in your life when it's your turn. And those concepts were comfort, peace, and freedom. And I say that because, not all of us have the same goals and dreams. I mean, we're not all going to chase 15 cars and mansions and mega yachts and all this other kind of stuff. I met a lot of really cool people who were very, very happy, and they found their nirvana in a lot of unique and different ways. So for me, it was all about, how do I write this letter to Nicole and teach her about what she should chase in her lifetime? And at the same time, I had all these influences coming from the office of people I was coaching. And by the way, when I say coaching, I have no letters after my name. I'm not a doctor. I have nothing. I mean, it was like, it was coached by have to. So, but it worked. And so I kind of put all those things together and wrote the book. And, I had 80,000 words before I knew it. And the really weird thing was, I didn't think the book would go 10 feet, much less 10 miles. And it became a bestseller last fall. And I think the reason is, the book isn't necessarily about being a blue collar guy or gal. The book is about, let's step back for a second. Let's examine history. Let's begin with the end in mind by saying, what do you want your life to look like first? Let's draw that out in amazing, colorful, crystal clear detail. Draw that out for yourself, put it on the wall and stare at it whenever you can, and then figure out one of the many, many paths that there are to get there. And only one of those is college. I mean, there's college, there's military, there's trades, there's tech schools, there's apprenticeships, there's all these different ways to get there. And that's always been true. It's not untrue now.
Yeah.
But it always starts with, what do you want your life to look like first? And then let's find a way to go get it.
Do you know, one of the biggest things for me, I've realized, is that so many people just don't ever do that. Don't ever even think about doing that exercise. Or even if they did, it's either they don't know where to start, they wouldn't have any structure, or it's kind of like, oh, I'll do it when I get time. And then years go by. So when did you, I have 2 questions there, but, I would label, as you say, the coaching, the mentorship as kind of, let's call it personal development, if we put it under one umbrella. So at what point did you kind of get interested in that world of, you know, it's more than just I'm working. It's like, well, how can I positively impact other people?
Well, I got to tell you, it was a little bit selfish, and it was a little bit, kind of like a light bulb. So the more people in our company that I could have conversations with that could then draw their future, and then they became self-managing.
Mhm.
They became self-directed. They became goal-oriented. It was almost like, hey, Ken, thanks for the training. Now get out of my way and let me do it. So I realized that there was so much power in a lot of people rowing the boat in the same direction for themselves, though, not for the team.
Mhm.
And that's different than you hear a lot. A lot of times it's, oh, we're all rowing for the team, so we can win the gold medal. I wanted each one of these people to win for themselves constantly, whether it was a 3-month goal or a 6-month or a year or a 2-year or 10-year goal. I wanted them to chase multiple things at the same time, because the more people that I could do that with, the less people I had to watch, in other words, or
Yeah.
manage.
Yeah.
And at that point, the power just took over and my company just went crazy. And I just kept gathering more and more and more of these people on the team.
Yeah.
And if you weren't chasing something, you weren't working here. It's just that simple. So all I can tell you is, you talk about Elon Musk and how much brain power he has, or Stephen Jobs or whatever, and how they use more of their brain than other people. I don't know. I think the answer to that is pretty clear. They see things, they see things in a big way, and they see things in the future, and they see things that they want to do.
Mm.
We all have the ability to visualize. Just take a typical vacation. We are all experts at planning and executing and anticipating our vacation this fall or next spring. We're great at that, but why should we stop there?
Yeah.
You should anticipate everything in your life. And the more people you can find to do that, the more power there is in that group, and the farther your company will travel, with or without you, by the way.
Mm.
Which is really kind of cool, because then you get the ability to manage less and grow more. And it's just a really fun way to work, knowing that everyone's out there trying to make something happen for themselves.
I think it's so important to have some time to be, reflective of what you want in life, where you want to go, what you want to achieve. And yeah, my big thing is, we were never really taught any of that at school. And for a lot of people, they kind of see that the only path, I know we've gone back to the college thing, but is, go to school, get qualifications, get some kind of, letters after your name or certificates, and then work for someone else, and that's it for the rest of your life. And you're like, I think it's great to go and work for someone else, because you can gain experience. But being taught even to go and start your own business or your own side hustle can be such a big learning experience. But yeah, we're just not, we're just not taught that kind of thing over here. Whether that,
yeah, and I think the interesting thing there is, we have the same thing. So, okay, you got to go to high school, you got to get good grades, you got to get a good ACT score, then you got to get a good scholarship, and then you got to get a degree, and then you got to get a job. And if you do all those things, then you can start living.
yeah.
Wrong. Okay, let's pick what the living looks like first, and then let's find the myriad of different ways that you can go there. Again, only one of those paths being college. And it's so funny how we've reinvented the wheel at our own detriment, because all the people that are pushing for a higher education are complaining about the plumber who just, and by the way, that plumber's making $200,000 a year. Okay. But he's just a plumber, or she's just a welder. Yeah, it's really odd to see the dichotomy in that. And that's why, again, I wrote the book, to get as many. What I really wanted to do was to let people know that no matter what, you are in control, especially if you work for yourself or if you work in a skilled trade. You're in control of your own input, your output, the quality of that output. You're in charge of, your schedule. You're in charge of your day. You're in charge of, the financial gains that you have. You don't get that when you're sitting in some cubicle or some office building on the 15th floor, and you have no idea what part you play in this whole bigger wheel. So there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot of advantages to that. And all I'm saying is, for the people who shouldn't go to college, let me tell you the best way to try to make your life work, because it's worked for me and a lot of my friends, and I think it's a great path to follow.
I think it's so important. I mean, again, we've got guys from all around the world that listen to the podcast, but I would say about 75% from the UK, and then about 15% from the US, and then dotted around. And that's why it's cool when sometimes I'll get an email or a message from a guy from somewhere maybe I've never even heard of in the world that will have listened to it maybe an hour's podcast, but they'll have taken one sentence or one golden nugget, and that will be the spark that maybe they think, do you know what, I could start a business, or I'm going to get in insane shape, or all these different things that I think could just motivate a guy to, like learn what's important in life for him. And there's a guy who runs a podcast. He's based out in Tampa actually at the moment, but it was a podcast called it's gone out of my head now, but it's basically about designing or life by design. And I remember listening to that 7 years ago, and him basically, saying, echoing what you said about, even sitting down and saying, look, what do you want your life to be like? The kind of ultimate goal, and then work back from there. And I was still working the city, and I was working at a desk 200 hours a month, not particularly enjoying it. And I was like, well, for one, I know it's not this. That's priority number one, is know that
right.
what I've got isn't what I want. And it was, I wanted more freedom and a bit more kind of impact in my life. But that's why with the podcast, I'm very much about guys taking some time to reflect on what they want out of life, and listening to guys like yourself and anybody else in kind of a personal development sphere. But I wanted for you, other guys in the personal development, because I saw that, unless I'm mistaken, you've got a quote from Tony Robbins saying that what you did is great. So I just wondered how that came about.
Well, I worked with Tony Robbins has a book out called Life Force that he wrote with a couple of amazing doctors, and they really talk about the possibilities of keeping yourself healthy and injury free, as long as you can. And I'm a golfer, so that resonated with me. So I went to see some of his clinics in Naples, Florida, and we started a program where they're maintaining who I am better than I would on my own. So it's nice to have partners in health, almost like an athlete does.
Yeah.
And so he was running that, and I knew his doctor friends, and I just communicated with and through him to the doctors to him, and he was happy to do it because he understands exactly where I'm coming from. And when he looked at my stuff and kind of delved deeper into it, he was like, nobody's really talking about this stuff. They all say that you should have vision for the future, you should do it, but then they always end it with, I'm a PhD, or I'm a psychologist, or a clinical this or that. And here's the thing about being an entrepreneur. Okay. Everyone says, well, Ken, you're lucky you're that entrepreneur guy. Nonsense. Okay. There's about 9 characteristics to being an entrepreneur: persistence, resilience, faith, initiative, all those kinds of things. Okay. Humility, charity, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Every one of us has those emotions or those characteristics within us. I guarantee you. The only difference between me and somebody else is I saw what my future could look like, and then all those characteristics came out and just pushed me down that path. And that's why I talk about Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. The power of your brain to attract itself to what it sees very clearly is ridiculous. It's awesome. And we don't use that because we live for Friday. We live for the next paycheck or the next bill that we have to pay.
Yeah.
And so when people look beyond that, they almost instantly become entrepreneurs because what they see is so attractive to them that all these little characteristics come out and just push them towards that goal. And that's what I think should be taught more in schools, because, you talked about so few people are willing to do that. This study, I saw a study from Virginia Tech, and they put 100 people in a room and they said, raise your hand if you have crystal clear goals. Only 20 people did. So then they said, okay, of the 20, you 80 can go away. Of the 20 that's left, how many of you write those goals down? Only 4. And then they said, okay, of the 4 that are left, how many of you have that on your wall somewhere where you see it every day? 1.
Wow.
So 1 out of 100 people do something that is so easy I can't believe we all aren't doing it. So
Yeah.
it just makes it fun to talk about, actually.
I think it's, again, going back to, I was encouraged, guys, through the Whole Man Academy to, and it's not always about you must set goals, but it's about at least take some time to think about what you want. But like you say, don't just do it and then write it in a jotter and then put it in the cupboard, because it's like, okay, well done for taking the first step, but not looking at it, manifesting it, thinking about it day after day can be part of the effect. But that comes back down to, I went to the Tony Robbins event, Date with Destiny, in Miami, which was amazing. And like there, they'd get you to do self-reflective stuff on your relationship as much as anything else. And I would say I wouldn't be with my partner now if I hadn't been on that day, because I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to stay with her. And the whole day that they did on it, I realized that I was being a dick, basically. And, now kind of, that's many years later. But I realized that obviously that's an expensive trip for most people. It's out of their reach to spend thousands to travel to these events. But, there's still a lot of free resources online, be it Tony Robbins or even our little kind of resources we've got. But it's just encouraging, guys, if you've got 10 minutes on the train, even sitting down and saying, how can you create a life that you're also in charge of? Because I see now, especially in this last 2 years, it's like there's a real drive to close down small businesses. And all that does is then create people going to work at these much bigger chains. But therefore you are dependent on the state when they
Absolutely,
when they make you do things. So it's an interesting time for people with small businesses that are getting them destroyed left, right, and center.
yeah. And again, you can't underestimate the power of doing something for yourself. I mean, I had a lot of jobs. I worked at a bowling alley. I was a landscaper. I was a ditch digger. I worked in a bakery. I delivered newspapers. And I did a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I can remember working on these really beautiful houses, on the other side of Cleveland, and doing these huge landscape jobs with pine trees and boulders and waterfalls. And at the end of the day, I'd stand back and lean on my shovel and I would go, oh my gosh, that is absolutely beautiful. I call it the stand back moment. Okay.
Right.
And whether you're landscaping a house or you're building a something, or you're fixing or repairing, or you're creating, or, maybe doing some type of artwork, whatever it might be, or you're satisfying a group of people with a meal or whatever, there's that moment that you get working for yourself where you say, I controlled this from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's missing, because, the stigma of being a blue collar worker is ridiculous, especially when you see the kind of money that they're making, the control they have over their own lives, and the things that they're able to accomplish for themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody ever came up into my driveway, saw what I've accomplished, and said, hey, where'd you go to school?
Yeah. Where's your certificates?
Yeah. It's always been, how did you grind this life out? Okay, I'm happy to talk about that, right?
Yeah.
But I laugh because, their opinion is that's the only way that could have happened, and nothing could be further from the truth there.
It's a great story, and I think the more guys I talk to who have gone on their own journey, and sometimes it's not been without its, one step forward, two steps back. It's not always progress in a straight line. But I wonder if you, apart from playing golf, what do you do for fun? What's your leisure time?
Well, I work out a lot. I play golf and I boat. I have a boat. So
Right.
Those are pretty much my three. And I love to travel. And that usually involves one of those other three things. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm kind of a health hobbyist. I'm one of those guys, as I told you earlier.
Yeah.
I like to know what's going on, hopefully before it goes on. So I do a lot of analysis that way. And it's just cool. I mean, it's a fun way to live. It's a fun to anticipate all the different things that you want to do to make your life, a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I like it. And often we'll ask, we send an e-letter out on a Tuesday and a Friday that goes out to hundreds of guys, dotted around the world. And one of the weeks I actually put on there, just a reminder for some guys, like to question what you do for fun. And one of the guys messaged back and said, I realized that I work so hard and I've kind of forgotten the stuff I like to do. And as you say, be it golfing or running or whatever it is, to go and have fun. So it's always a reminder for a guy, at the end of the day, who knows when life's going to end, but on the last day of your life, you probably won't lay on your deathbed and say, I wish I'd have worked more. You know?
Yeah, that is so true. And I think life is like a bunch of buckets, and I think you need to fill each bucket equally, spiritually and relationship wise and work wise and quiet time wise and fun wise and exercise. I think you have to fill all those buckets equally, because to your point, if you're not careful, you're going to work so hard, work your ass off for so many years, and all of a sudden you're like, cool, I got all this money now, and then boom, I have heart problems, or I have my knees won't work anymore, or whatever. I mean, you do have to enjoy this path along the way. And I think that's the great part about life, is we're all really kind of in control of that, whether we know it or not. But filling those buckets equally is something I think that a lot of people need to step back and go, you know what? I do need to put a little more time into that bucket, because I'm overflowing in the work and the stress bucket, but I don't have a whole lot of fun in the spontaneity bucket, or the exercise bucket, or the health, whatever it might be. I think people need to spend a lot more time kind of leveling that out.
Yeah, I think especially we've had this kind of general discussion about, you would say, with social media as well. Sometimes the social media bucket's full up because people are on it so much, and it's like, okay, well, can you take something out of there and put it into the, get out in the wilderness and get out in nature. Well, I know I've taken up plenty of your time, and I appreciate it's been a real fascinating discovery of talking to you, and also just learning more about the work you do, because that's what the podcast is about, is finding kind of interesting guys from around the world and drilling down on what works for them.
Well, one of the things that I did with the book Blue Collar Cash is, a lot of times you have books and you read them and then you put them up on the shelf and they're kind of like trophies. Okay. I read all these books. Look at me. All right. But then you forget about what's in it. And so I built this course, and it's 1 hour a week for 8 weeks, or you could do it in 4 straight days if you wanted to. It just depends on how fast you go through it. But what I wanted to make sure of is that I wanted to make absolutely certain that if you read something, specifically my book, that you put it into practice, you put it into your own life immediately, like the next day.
Yeah.
So, I've seen these courses for $700, $1,000, $1,500. You've been to these places. I sell this course for $99, and you get a free book with it. That's $25. So, yeah. And here's the thing. If you do that, I also donate a course and a free book to somebody else.
Oh, great.
Someone of your choice, or someone here that could use the help. So I didn't do this to make money, because my life was really good before I wrote this book. But I thought to myself, if I could find a way to get this information into their hands and then kind of make them do it, and then they could not only help themselves but somebody else at the same time, I thought that would be a winning formula. So that's kind of how we set it up.
You made me remember the term shelf development, where people often just buy books and I either read them or they don't read them. But they, like you say, it's kind of like entertainment. It's like, oh wow, that was really good to learn all that. Anyway, I move on. And you're like, but what are you doing with it? What? Right. How? Tell me what you're going to implement. And often it's like, well, no, I'm gonna get another book on something else. And you're like, no. So I agree. It's good to remind people that there's that saying, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. Which
and there's also another saying that between knowing and doing is a mile of bad road if you're not careful.
Yeah, and I've been guilty of it myself, where I'll have bought a book and I'll have read a bit of it, and then seen another book available and bought that one, and realized that that's been on my shelf for like 3 years and I haven't actually read it. But if someone asks, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've got that book, and you're like, yeah. So we've all done it. But well, I'm going to let you go. I'm sure you've got stuff to do. But I always say, A, it's been a pleasure to talk, but B, hopefully one day, you never know with the universe how our paths might cross, and it'd be great at some point to see you maybe either in London or over the US in the flesh at some point.
Oh, I'd love to do that. That would be super great. It's been fun being with you as well. And again, if you and I can help people out, that's what we're here for. So for all you guys out there, you got this and we got your back. So go make it happen.
No, I appreciate it. Lovely. Right. Well, I appreciate all your time, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, take care.
Thanks for listening. Remember to sign up to our game-changing weekly e-letter that's read by men around the world. Sign up at wholemanacademy.com/movement. Until next time.